Hello and welcome everyone. My name is Victoria Waba from Virtualization and Cloud Review, and I am so thrilled to welcome you to today's webcast titled, What Businesses Need to Know About Successful Cloud and Data Protection Strategies, sponsored by Hivelocity and Veeam. Before we begin, just want to cover a few housekeeping details for today. If you have any questions throughout the presentation, please make sure to type those into the Q&A box, and we'll get them answered for you throughout the presentation. Our sponsors have also provided some resources which do correspond with today's event, so please take a moment to check those out. They are located to the right-hand side of your audience console. And as a reminder, today's webcast is being recorded, so keep an eye out for a link in your email to rewatch the presentation or to share it with a colleague. And now, for our speakers today, we have the pleasure of hearing from Jeff Collins, Hivelocity Senior Product Manager of Managed Cloud Services and Colocation, and Kirsten Stoner, Veeam Product Strategy Technologist. So we're in for a really great event, and with that, I will pass the time over to Colleen Johnson to get us started.
Perfect. Thank you, Victoria. Okay, hello, everyone. First, on behalf of Hivelocity and Veeam, I really wanted to thank everyone for taking time to join us today. I think it's going to be a really, really good conversation and very beneficial. I'm Colleen Johnson. I'm the Senior Product Marketing Manager at Hivelocity. I'm going to serve as your moderator today during most of the event. Victoria will join us again near the end for Q&A. So I wanted to start out just kind of listing out what we're going to talk about today. Our conversation, we have three areas that we feel are really vital to safeguarding your data and business. Some of the topics we're going to dive into is how aging infrastructure can hinder innovation, growth, and data protection. We're going to talk about enhancing resilience, security, and compliance through high-performance storage and cloud backup solutions. And then we're going to look at taking steps to modernize your storage, cloud, and data infrastructure for the future. And then, of course, we'll wrap up our conversation with just a couple of real-life cyber incident stories before we jump into the Q&A. And those are kind of really helpful, interesting, and fun. As stated, please feel free to submit questions during the discussion. We will tend to all the questions at the end of the presentation, and we may grab a few during the presentation if it's referring to something that Jeff and Kirsten are directly speaking about at the time. So without further ado, let's get started. First, we're going to start with a few statistics. You'll see this kind of throughout the presentation a little bit. We're going to start with how aging infrastructure hinders innovation and growth. Data protection. And before we set Kirsten and Jeff off, these are the statistics. So 71% of all data breaches are typically due to vulnerabilities in legacy systems. Lacking modern security can enhance the chance of cyber attacks, notably ransomware, especially today. 55% of organizations are typically reporting outdated systems or slowing their ability to launch new products and services. So that's a little bit of a concern, especially for growth. And legacy systems can consume crazily up to 80% of an IT budget, leaving little left to invest in new technologies and protection, which is also a pretty big concern if you're looking at future-proofing. So keeping those stats in mind, let's go to more detail. So Jeff, I'm going to hand the reins over to you.
Perfect. Thank you, Colleen. I appreciate everyone taking the time out of your busy schedules to kind of hang out with us for an hour or so and join us for kind of our informal panel discussion. And by all means, we keep this interactive. If you have questions that, like Colleen mentioned, that come up as we're going through the different topics, please feel free to reach out. So this is, like I said, this is kind of informal, but so I'll kick it off. And I guess I'm going to start off by asking Kirsten a question. So I guess, Kirsten, from a Veeam perspective, how have you seen your clients struggling to innovate when it comes to having legacy or even inefficient storage platforms?
Yeah, Jeff. So legacy infrastructure is going to make it a bit more difficult to manage your data. Businesses today are required to store vast amounts of data, and businesses run on data. So when we think of legacy infrastructure, sometimes they're not compatible with having, one management console to manage data in different areas. Maybe you have data on premises, maybe you have some data in the cloud, maybe you have some data in remote offices. Legacy infrastructure is only going to make that more complex to be able to manage that data effectively. And today's businesses need to be able to manage that data effectively, no matter where it lives, for many different reasons, right? It can help prevent data loss, and with data loss can also in turn lead to downtime or loss in productivity. Additionally, legacy systems are outdated, so they're going to have compatibility issues. When we think about new applications, it's going to require, more processing, more power, more RAM, more memory to power those applications, especially to meet, our end users' expectations. No one wants to log into their computer every day and then not be able to access their email address due to it being hosted on a legacy infrastructure, and it's just too slow to keep up with the demand. So you're going to have compatibility issues with modern applications, and then you're also going to have security vulnerabilities just due to the lack of feature set that these legacy systems have. Lastly, we want to think about scalability. I mentioned this a little bit earlier, but businesses today are required to store vast amounts of data to meet demands, and legacy systems may prohibit scaling to maintain this data set. Jeff, how have you seen some ways that legacy systems have affected scalability?
Yeah, it's good points, and I'm kind of looking at it more from the kind of the product and the MSP perspective. But I would say the biggest thing that comes to mind is just ongoing increasing application performance requirements. So you've got applications that are constantly getting bigger, requiring more resources to run. Your databases are getting faster, getting bigger, being integrated with other cloud native type of products where they can do data analytics. Your IOPS requirements are huge. And I guess the big thing is if you don't have enough horsepower to run all those applications, it can cause bottlenecks. It can hurt your application's performance. And it's sad but true, but these problems can lead to other issues too, like loss in revenue. If your application's not performing like it should, you could leave dollars on the table. You can have, when you're designing your disaster recovery environment, you could have negative impacts to your RTO or your RPO requirements, which could again shut down your business and take dollars off the table. And you mentioned security issues as well. That's something that if you're not current on, take operating systems for example, kind of outside of storage, but if you can't patch your operating systems, you open the door to hackers and vulnerabilities within your platform. So all kinds of security issues. There's different things that come about that come to mind.
Yeah, those are great points. And, when we think about storing data and the amount of data these applications are, bringing in and having to retain that data for longer, legacy systems, they're not easily expandable. It can be costly or even require a complex upgrade just to scale these systems appropriately, right? You might have to buy, another server. You might have to, if you're using a colocation, you might have to, add another rack just to be able to scale your application appropriately. And if they can't scale appropriately, performance is going to decrease, and then systems become slower and more complex. Especially we think about, retention, like I mentioned. How are you going to retain this data to meet compliance and, regulations today? So proper capacity managed can be a challenge when we think of legacy systems. Systems today need to be able to scale. They need to be able to utilize these data management technologies like partitioning, replication, as well as storage technologies to store the data like compression, deduplication, and things like that, right? So what are some ways that teams can manage capacity more better, more appropriately, in your opinion?
Yeah, it's definitely a challenge. Even like, I guess from a service provider's perspective, via Colo, or even with our latest private cloud VMware deployment that we just launched, it can be a headache, and I think just kind of having proper capacity management and kind of future proofing your storage is key. For example, in our platform, we utilize Pure Storage. We've got separate data volumes specific for Veeam to do backups that are designated. But we kind of take it, and I've had this with other vendors like EMC, for example, but they've got a financial model that works really, really well in that space for, they kind of alleviate some of that headache and that concern about capacity management. So like with their, I don't know if you're familiar with like their Evergreen One solution, but we utilize that, and essentially we just pay them a flat per gig rate, and they bring in the infrastructure, if it's hard drives or additional frames, based on our clients' needs. So you've kind of got that whole, like, I wouldn't say infinite capacity, but they're watching it, and when certain thresholds are exceeded, they'll usually within a couple of days they'll bring that in. Which, you know, especially from the ops side, it gives them, it's just one less thing for them to have to deal with. And within the IT department too, capacity management is huge. I think from the MSP perspective, it's just kind of scaled a little bit larger because you're managing multiple clients, but it just makes it a lot easier. And then that kind of gets into you know, cost savings. Like, so Kirsten, what are your thoughts on kind of how these issues, or what have you seen from a, like how these can, like financial issues can affect your clients from a financial perspective?
Yeah, so I always think of like, here at Veeam, we always want to keep everything simple, flexible, and reliable. And sometimes within these legacy infrastructures, they become more complex, right? You have a lot of servers, you're trying to scale, maybe you're storing data in multiple locations, right? So with more complexity comes more risks for errors, it comes more time to manage, which in a sense is a hidden expense, right? Like if you have a legacy infrastructure and it's taking you longer to manage this storage, it's an expense to you as a business because your employees are not as efficient, right? And then when you think about protecting these legacy systems, it might take longer to, you know, back up these legacy systems. You might have longer backup windows, which then it would in turn lead to longer or higher recovery point objectives. And when you think about disasters, right, if a cyber attack comes into your infrastructure and wipes out all your data, and then you say, okay, now it's time to restore, but your recovery point objective was, you know, 48 hours ago, is that something that your business can afford, to be able to lose that amount of data that, you know, missed that recovery point period because it took so long to back up the legacy system? So these are some things that you need to think about when you're thinking about, you know, some of the costs that are associated with older systems, right? There's other uses for them, but when you think about recovering and things like that, we really want to make sure that we are aligning our systems to our objectives of our business, you know, recovery point objectives. And then if you can't meet those RPOs, those recovery time objectives as well, how much money is that going to cost the business? And is that something that your business can still operate from moving forward? Because sometimes, you know, a business gets hit with a ransomware attack and it's the end because they can't afford to lose that much data, that much time to be offline. And to address these issues, it's really important for companies to consider a more modern architecture, whether they're thinking about utilizing the cloud, maybe they're thinking about a hybrid environment, a hyper-converged infrastructure, private cloud, things like this that they can utilize to make sure that if something bad were to happen, they're able to continue operating their business as normal. What do you think about that, Jeff?
Yeah, I've seen it a couple of different ways. I mean, I think just especially when you look at any type of public cloud is a great example, or even like in AWS or VMware, if you don't know what you're doing, like you can absolutely, it can actually, like you'll spend too much. You can if you don't know what you're doing. Like we hear from our clients all the time. I think the biggest one has always been about egress charges, for example, coming out of AWS or Azure or whatever. But it comes down to if you don't have, like, there's additional costs that go into that. So hiring that IT staff that has the familiarity with how to run environments, be it VMware, AWS, or in Azure. And there's so many different options, like networking charges, choosing the wrong flavor of storage. You know, there's different ways to archive things that costs more or less depending on how quickly you want to retrieve that data. Then you get into like the various financial models. And I think this is what scares a lot of our clients. Like, how do you like within AWS and Azure, like how do you navigate savings plans or reserved instances or spot instances? It can be a pretty daunting challenge, and it scares a lot of our clients. I hear it all the time. This is kind of how, if you've heard of the FinOps practice, that's kind of how that came to be. And that's huge businesses or companies will pay FinOps providers there's tons of money just to save cost in public cloud. So I think kind of we've kind of, when we put this our private cloud product together, we kind of took that into mind and designed it such that it's simple, it's straightforward. You kind of alleviate some of those hidden surprises from a financial perspective. And then another thing, like around application performance. So like, I would say in any solution, especially if you're building something for a client, in our case, we want to make sure that what we're building is going to meet their needs, not only from a technical perspective, but also from a financial perspective as well. So as we're doing this, we want to make sure that it's going to run their business as efficiently as possible. So that gets back into like making sure your backup policies are correct, making sure you're on, the equipment that you're running the applications on meets the horsepower requirements. Because if you don't, it'll reflect poorly on both us as the MSP provider and the client. And then if they're not happy with the service they're providing, or it's not getting the performance out of their applications that they thought they were going to get, they're going to waste more time and effort and resources looking for an alternate solution. So that's something that's popped up. Kind of like more on the colo side, maintenance contracts, that's a pain to maintain, especially on like end-of-life storage equipment or operating systems. I know, for example, we've got clients on Windows 2008 and 2012 still. And you can't patch that. There's ways to get around it. You can get third-party contracts, support contracts to still work, apply certain types of patches, but it's not coming from Microsoft. Just an example. And then the other one's around data retention. I think this comes down to kind of establishing that up front, especially if you're in your business, you're launching a new application and you want to know like where's going to be the best place to store that data. Having a solid data retention policy in place is key to that. Right? And having the tools in place that can push data to certain places. So maybe you're looking for more of a hybrid type of solution. Maybe you want to have most of your data local. Maybe you want to have it in another data center, or maybe you want to utilize products that act as storage enablers like Veeam to write a copy to AWS. Maybe you've got a regulatory compliancy that says, yeah, you've got to retain healthcare records or legal documents or whatever for X amount of time. There's cost-efficient ways to design your data retention policy to maximize those savings and put things in places that are going to make the most financial sense. And so I think kind of bringing all those tools together and helping clients solution that, I think that's key. But I think those are the main ones that come to mind from a financial perspective.
Awesome, thank you both. A lot of information with that. Aging infrastructure obviously is something that really needs to have attention geared towards it. So I'd like to move on to the next point. Now we kind of covered some of this already because we had a lot of information that we just divulged in the previous screen. But in here, for increased risk of data loss, like I said, we kind of touched on some of these, but Jeff, with the older infrastructure and storage systems, there tends to be a higher risk of data loss, which we just kind of covered. Can you provide a little bit more insight on how aged systems may not work with modern backup technologies and how these older systems, to Kirsten's point, can affect RTO and RPO and what this means for like possible data loss situations?
Yeah, and I think Kirsten touched on this. Maybe we can expand on it in a second. But yeah, I would say not having, like, if you've got slow storage that can't keep up with all the change rate in your database, for example, and you've got it mostly, I mean, the RTO and RPO obviously comes into play more for disaster recovery and business continuity. So say you've got everything running in your primary location, you've got a backup data center, If that equipment is not keeping your data in sync at site B, so if site A goes away, so say someone's working on the street and takes a backhoe to a piece of fiber that's feeding your environment, and it goes down, you've got to really define kind of what those RTO and RPO goals are, because there's more to it than just the technology. I mean, I've had clients over the years that say they can't have any downtime or have any, they can't lose any data at all, like not one single transaction. And you can design it that way. You absolutely can. It costs a lot, you know, versus what do you really need? Like, and I think it comes down to the business. Like maybe more on the e-commerce side, yeah, they can't afford to be down at all. But for most businesses, you know, an hour, 2 hours of downtime, or you know, maybe two or a couple percentage points of lost data is not the end of the world, and it can be recovered later once the site comes back up. But just things to take into consideration when you're building your disaster recovery environment. And you know, aging hardware is something that can cause a bottleneck. So and it's not just the storage. There's all kinds of different features. But Kirsten, I know you mentioned that earlier. Is there any other points you want to add to that?
Yeah, you know, I work in the data protection space, so, you know, I'm always thinking about ways to protect our data and what we can do to make sure our business continue to operate. So when I think about legacy systems, I just worry that they're not able to be protected properly. Like every software that we use, every application, there's always some type of end of life support. Like we're no longer patching this old server, we're no longer offering it updates, or with a new product version, the Windows server you're running isn't supported anymore. So when you think about compatibility issues with some of these legacy systems, it may just not be able to be backed up properly by your backup software, or even if it was able to back up successfully, you may run into restore issues, or worse, realize the backup never was taken properly in the first place. And then that's an issue like further down the line, right? So because you go to restore, you can't restore, you realize your backup never was taken successfully, and then you're out of luck. You have no data, you can't get your data back. And this also leads me to the importance of, you know, making sure that we're testing our backups. It's always important to check our backups to make sure that our data is recoverable. Also, when we think about some of these newer technologies or these technologies that we're using today to ensure that we're meeting customer demands, like cloud services, security software, and things like that, backup solutions today are designed to integrate with these types of services so that they can be used, they can back up these applications more properly, right? So I was actually just sitting in a training today, and we were talking about being able to back up Mongo databases, right? And before, you know, our new feature at Veeam, we can back up Mongo databases now. But before, to back that up appropriately, you needed to, you know, use a pre-freeze post-thaw script, which actually made the backup process, you know, a little bit more complex than you would want it to be. Hey, we can use these scripts, we can write these scripts, we can maintain these, but it's just another extra layer of, you know, complexity that you're adding into the backup process. And that goes with, you know, being able to make sure that we're simplifying our backup processes, we're able to back them up properly, and then keep it simple and also get restore options. And like I mentioned, there's security concerns. We want to think about how we're storing this data. It's very important. And then not only this, but yeah, modern applications often require faster resources to just even operate, right? So all in all, when we think of, it's never easy to, you know, I guess, upgrade or digitally transform our backup environment, our production environment. But as the requirements for business today keep, you know, up leveling, people demand things faster and faster and faster, it's important that we really take the time to invest in these new technologies all around. And so when we think about even our old legacy equipment, right, we don't want to necessarily get rid of that, right? Are there ways that customers can still modernize, but also maintain some of this legacy equipment for other reasons in their environment?
Yeah, I think so. I've seen that, and I think it kind of comes down like if the company is looking to make that capital investment in new gear, to kind of solve some of the problems we've been talking about so far, that old equipment isn't necessarily a bad thing. Maybe you kind of look at repurposing that. Maybe you make it archival storage, or maybe you use it in a test or a dev environment, something that's not mission critical or critical to your business. But you can still utilize that asset just for another purpose. So we've seen that. And I think just in general, in kind of looking at it from a modernization perspective, you've got to kind of figure out what's going to work best in any circumstance. There's no silver bullet answer here, unfortunately. But I will say, like with Veeam, like when we're managing or when we're setting backups for all our managed clients, I think priority number one, make sure you've got that data retention policy and your backup schedule outlined and to what's going to meet the company's requirements. And I've noticed, like once all that's done, a lot of time, the more time is spent on the setup, the better. And so, like once we define what that backup schedule looks like and have the backup and restore and data protection configured, Veeam kind of operates on autopilot. Like we don't really have to touch it too much, which kind of, like I mentioned earlier, kind of frees up our ops folks to go do different things and work other tickets. Not to say but I will say, like, just having visibility, like we'll do, for example, we'll do nightly backup reports just to make sure everything went through, and for some reason a backup fails or whatever, we're aware of that. We would go remediate that, and that's the case, outside of the MSP world as well, with clients that are maintaining those types of strategies. I think just keeping up with, just because you've got old gear, it's not the end of the world. You can repurpose it somewhere else, typically.
Awesome. Yeah, there's a lot of information there, especially with the older infrastructure and taking the fear of that you don't have to get rid of it. And I think that's a great point to come across, that is still usable in different circumstances within your business. So we're going to move forward. Yay, more stats, because I like them. So let's transition now to data security challenges with older infrastructure, and resiliency and security and compliance. So here's a few statistics, of course, because I like my numbers. So 29% of businesses with old infrastructure report that they're unable to recover certain lost data, primarily due to the incompatibility and inefficiency of an outdated backup solution. And then 46% are using legacy systems that are more likely to experience data loss or corruption compared to those utilizing more modern cloud-based solutions. So again, some more numbers to kind of consider as we go through our next conversation here. So I'm going to turn this now over to Kirsten. So with privacy regulations, they're constantly evolving. Outdated systems can be exposed to compliance failures and security breaches. Can you kind of go a little bit further into detail about what may cause these situations with older infrastructure and storage systems?
Yeah, so if there's one thing I've seen within, the cyber landscape today, and hearing about, ransomware attacking businesses, going to conferences and hearing about, what type of ransomware is coming in, these different threat actors. One thing that is sticking out to me is that the cyber actors, the cyber attacks, they're changing, they're evolving, they're getting more sophisticated. And the same strategies that were used in the past are not going to be the same strategy today. Yeah, there might be some still fundamental concepts, some foundation security strategies that you can use, but you have to evolve to, meet these threat actors where they're at. they're finding new ways to get into our data. And a lot of times with these old systems that lack these security updates, this is where the threat actors are going to find their way into your environment. They're using the flaws in the software, the unpatched systems, to launch the attack. And that's something that we need to remember and think about. I know that a lot of companies now, software vendors, and even anybody, right? Software vendors specifically, we send out, like, if there's a security patch, we make sure that we send this out and let everybody know immediately to update their systems. So this is something that, if you don't have set up already, is a really good tool to make sure that you're staying on top of these patches and things like that. Not only that, but old systems are just less compatible with modern security tools, making it difficult to implement successful security measures. And then when you think about also, the evolution of AI, right? One of the events I went to this past spring, it was called the RSA conference in San Francisco. It was a really good security conference, but they talked about how AI, threat actors are using AI to automate more effective phishing campaigns, using AI to get into our infrastructure, into our environments more sophisticatedly. So, these legacy systems that might not be compatible with these new security softwares or these new security features to be able to run, it's going to make it more difficult to keep the threat actors out. So to really have a resilient infrastructure, you need to make sure you're investing in the proper measures, the strategies, and storage to stay resilient.
Yeah, that's some really, really good points. And Jeff, let's touch on how businesses can overcome or take measures to establish proactive security and compliance frameworks, how to harden their environments to decrease the chance of vulnerabilities, and then also when updating their infrastructure, how to balance innovation with the complexities of security and all the regulatory compliances that are out there.
Yeah, compliancy is its own animal. I will say I've worked with that throughout my career. And I think just even achieving, not only achieving, like achieving and maintaining a compliancy is a full-time job. Like, I remember being a part of SOC 2 audits at a previous company, and it seems like it would take a good part of the year. And as soon as you get done, you get like a break for a month or so, and then you start over again for the next year. It's crazy. And there's a lot of stuff that goes into that. I mean, there's all kinds of security elements and it depends on what you're looking to do too. If you're HIPAA, if you're PCI, if you're SOC, or it just kind of depends on which one you're trying to meet. I would say visibility is key there. There's all kinds of tools. I don't want to throw out too many acronyms, but CSPM, for example, is a good scanning tool that a lot of security providers will implement to essentially look at all of your environments, be it local or on the cloud or whatever, and basically bump your current settings and how everything's configured up to known controls based on PCI or HIPAA or whichever one you pick, and show you like how to remediate that. So visibility, pen testing, seeing if there's, throw some artificial, nice attacks, I guess, at your environment to see what breaks and see where the holes are. Like Kirsten mentioned, anything that can't be patched, that's going to open the door to hackers. But this is something kind of like more from the MSP side. We kind of look at compliancy more as you'll hear it on the public cloud side as well. It's that shared responsibility model. So that's no different than what we're providing. So like on the data center side, the physical security, the access to the building, who goes in the cage to work on things, where the cameras are pointed. Then it kind of goes up a little bit to background checks, kind of process reviews. And this is even before you get into the actual application itself. Because actually legally, like service providers are not allowed to provide audits, right? It always has to be a third party that's kind of has an independent view of things. And there's a lot that goes into it, so I guess you got the physical security, you got the infrastructure layer. And then you've got the application layer above that that's on the client side. So it's a collaborative effort, and we deal with it all the time. But to just maintain that, there's a lot of time and effort and expense that goes into that. But it comes down to the business and what their requirements are. But definitely a challenge. I've dealt with it throughout my career, like I said, and God bless the people that have to do those audits. So I'll leave it at that.
Awesome. Yeah, the compliance part is definitely thick. So I echo what you just said, God bless those people. We're going to move a little bit forward. So we did cover a lot of what we have here on this slide. But I think what we're trying to do here is just kind of like really punch the message home. So Jeff and Kirsten, what do you think about these additional measures for resilience? Is there anything else that you would like to add or expound on? Was there something that we maybe forgot to cover? Anything you want to add before we move forward?
Yeah, so I think all of these strategies that are listed on this slide are very good. When we think about, automated backup scheduling, this is going to be a really easy way to make sure that you are eliminating human error, right? The first step is to ensure that all machines are properly protected. And by being able to automate backup policies, you can ensure that no machine is left unprotected, and also making sure that you're receiving notifications of, maybe missed RPOs that you can get sent to you directly to your email or anything like that is really going to be helpful. I know within Veeam, we have, notifications that you can set up that look at your whole environment, make sure that all of your machines are backed up, and it'll actually let you know if one of your machines is not backed up, right? So then even if you're creating new virtual machines, you can tag them, you can tag those machines to be automatically included within a backup job. Is really going to make your life easier, make sure your data is protected, because the easiest way to recover from a cyber incident is to have a secure backup to recover from. And this really brings me to the next point. One of the next really big points on the slide is just making sure that you have secure and tested recovery plans. Now, I mentioned this a little bit earlier, right? Worst case scenario is, a disaster happens, a threat actor gets in your environment, encrypts all your data, and you have a backup, right? You have that backup. Luckily, the threat actor didn't get to it, and you're saying, okay, we can recover from this backup. But, it's the backup was untested, and you go to recover and you find out that you can't recover from that backup due to maybe storage corruption or something like that. Now that's a big problem. So we want to make sure that we are testing the recoverability of our backups. And with Veeam, we have Assure Backup technology that actually allows you to spin up your backups in an isolated lab environment that's separate from your production environment, and you can test the recoveries within that environment. Doing pings, heartbeat pings, making sure the applications, power up appropriately is just one of the things that you can do within that lab environment. And then when you think about having a tested disaster recovery plan, that's really important, right? Because the whole point is to have it tested. A disaster happens. I know when something crazy happens with me or something bad happens, I'm like a little bit frantic, I'm like, what am I going to do? Like, what are we going to do now? So testing your disaster recovery plan is really going to help make sure that you're going into your recovery with a calm approach. We've tested it. We know what machines need to be powered on first. We know which ones need to be recovered first. We know where our recovery locations are, where we're planning to recover to. And this familiarity is only going to come from testing your DR plans before the disaster actually happens. And then when you think about recovery locations, where are we recovering to? Is it going to be to a branch office? Is it to a service provider? Is it directly to the cloud? We also can understand, how long it is going to take to recover. So exactly, okay, so we know we've recovered this application in a test. We know it's going to take approximately around 4 hours, so then we're like, okay, well, it's going to take this long to recover from this full backup, right? So those are things you need to consider. And then we think about, the power of AI. I feel like I hear about AI all the time. I don't know if anybody else is kind of tired of hearing about it. I might be a little bit, but here I am talking about it again. Having AI-powered malware detection also with proactive threat hunting is really going to help because for bad actors to get all the way into the backup environment, there's a bigger security issue, right? Like they're not always going right for the backups. You know, they're trying to find other ways to get into your environment. So if you're backing up corrupted data, there's a bigger issue involved. But you know, sometimes that happens, right? And having an integrated backup solution with a cybersecurity solution is really going to be key because it's going to be key because it's going to provide you with another set of security tools that you can utilize on that data. So for example, just being able to scan that backup data during the backup operations to detect if any files have been encrypted by malware or to even look for any text artifacts created by malware is going to help identify, you know, that suspicious activity that infected data during the backup job, which should be almost like the last point where you would find it, right? But then you're able to detect it. So then you're able to mitigate that attack early on instead of it continuing to spread. You also think about like Yara scanning and antivirus scanning. This can be done on the backup data too, looking for those file extensions that are associated with ransomware so that you're able to detect them earlier. And then, you know, when you go to restore, how are you, so if your backup job detected suspicious activity or infected data, right? And then you're like, okay, now I know that I just backed up infected data. How am I going to restore? Well, also, you know, utilizing a backup solution that has security features, right, that are integrated with security vendors, right, it's going to be able to, you know, provide you with that lab environment where you can, you know, restore to, try to figure out, you know, which data is encrypted, which restore point is encrypted, or even, you know, restore to and perform an antivirus scan on that data before you actually restore it back into production. So you're not restoring infected data back into production and then just continually to spread the ransomware around, right? So these are all really good points, I think, to consider, especially when you're thinking about, you know, backup solutions, protecting your data. Like, what are some of the features that those solutions have that can help you mitigate attack, mitigate the data loss, and help identify, you know, a breach earlier than, you know, when it's been sitting in your environment for, you know, a month or something like that, right? Another point on this is the immutable backups, which I just like want to hit on real quick, just because we do see that ransomware threat actors go for the backup storage because they want you to pay that ransom. They want to take your money, right? So they're, you know, attacking the backup storage because they know that the easiest way to recover is from backups, right? It's from backups. So they're attacking that backup storage. So it's really important to make sure that you're using things like immutability, encryption, and air-gapped backups to make sure that you do have a copy of that data safe that you can recover from. So Jeff, I know I was rambled on forever, but what are some strategies that you've seen or implemented to help your customers achieve data resilience?
Yeah, I think just kind of looking at this latest evolution of our cloud platform, just incorporating all these different features, you know, to make sure when we do solution environments for our clients to run their business applications in, that you have all those tools at your fingertips to deploy. I will say you sparked you made something pop into my mind. So I was out at the Veeam conference earlier this year, and you know, some of these tech conferences, some of the sessions are kind of like watching paint dry. But I did end up in the Coveware one, and I thought that was so cool. So like if anyone's listening like isn't aware like how Veeam will scan a backup for ransomware code, it'll basically take the backup, scan it, run it through the SIEM, the SOC, and see if there's any malicious activity that's in there. And if there is, point it out. But they go a step further, and they actually negotiate with the cyber terrorists, which I thought was just I thought it was fascinating. And they gave examples and stories and how they would like triangulate it was like CIA stuff. It was kind of cool. I don't know, Kirsten, you got just real quick, not to kind of deviate, but is there any you want to share?
Yeah, the Coveware by Veeam is one of the new additions to the Veeam product suite, right? And it's basically just like a ransomware negotiation service, but it also helps do forensic triage and also does proactive assessments. And a lot of people talk about the COVR presentation at Veeam, and I would say that we had a tech expo, like an SE training maybe a month ago, and the COVR guys presented, and everybody's eyes were just like you could tell it was really interesting stuff, because it's really interesting, just the stuff they do every day. And so like one of the quotes that the CEO had said was that when a customer calls in, he knows within the first 15 minutes how the incident response is going to be within that initial first call. And this is really telling, right? Because this is just talking about your security and strategy the organization has in place before an attack happens. Because with ransomware, from what I've seen and what the research has shown, right, it's not really a matter of if, but more of a matter of when. And we also conduct an anonymous survey throughout the industry. It's called the Ransomware Trends Report. And it's with all the different types of organizations. It's not like just Veeam customers, it's just organizations in general. And it was noted that in 2023, 75% of organizations experienced a ransomware attack. And not only did some of them experience one attack, many of them experienced multiple attacks. And even some, I feel like the research showed that it was like per quarter. Like, could you imagine having to deal with that per quarter? So with this, like, I can't emphasize even more the importance of having a plan, a security strategy, a DR plan to combat ransomware and all the different disasters that can affect your organization. So some of the services that COVR provides, like I mentioned, is the ransomware incident response. So from assessment to recovery, this will help identify which ransomware strain it was, negotiate with threat actors, and also use decryption tools to help decrypt that data. They also have, expert negotiation skills. They have expert negotiators on staff to help minimize ransom payments. They perform that forensic triage to assess the impact of the attack, and also help determine the best recovery path, and then also help with offering proactive services just to make sure that you're preparing for those potential ransomware attacks. So it's some really, I don't know if I would say it's cool stuff, because it's not cool if you get hit with a ransomware attack. Like, I feel like that would be really unfortunate. But just the services they offer is just kind of Veeam's way to show that, we want you to be resilient against these threat actors. We want to be able to protect your data, and we are investing in the proper tools and the proper people and feature sets and innovations to make sure that even when it does happen, that we're giving the best to you as our customers to recover from that accident.
Awesome. And just a little plug, the ransomware report that Kirsten had referred to in here, that is attached. That is one of the PDFs that we have attached for you to take away and read as you will. And there's also a cloud protection report as well that will cover a lot of that information too. So please download those. Those are really, really good reports. We are going to move on. So we've done a lot of scary everything's old and things are going to happen. So let's move on. I'm not going to read each of these verbatim just because time permitting. Oh, sorry, went too far. But I was going to give like a little overview on some of these. So 94% of companies are looking to modernize their data protection. 75% of companies are planning on moving to cloud. 86% are upgrading their storage or planning to upgrade their storage. And 60% are investing in advanced storage, such as like software-defined or hyper-converged infrastructure. So good thing is when you look at these numbers, at least we know businesses are taking notice and looking to take action to modernize storage, cloud, and infrastructure. So these are some really good stats to go with. So moving forward, so Jeff, now that we're moving into this is how we're going to give you key points and how to modernize and what you need to do and steps to take forward. So can you provide insight as to how the next generation storage systems transform business processes and operational efficiency.
Yeah, and I would say it kind of comes down to app modernization, I guess, from the, like, and I always keep going back to the MSP perspective, but that's what I know. So that's what you get. I've seen clients kind of migrate. I'd say you get two buckets of clients. You've got your typical ones that run more of a three-tier infrastructure, and then you've got some that are more cloud native or cloud modern that are using things like containers and serverless. So you have to address all the the needs of both types of clients. I will say, kind of as we've built out, like for our latest private cloud offer, we've kind of planned it out so that it's kind of future-proof for the next 5 years to accommodate some of these. So, like, if we've got clients that do want to that do have a lot of requirements specific to artificial intelligence or machine learning, we do have the ability to add in things like GPUs. Now, we will make sure that they buy dedicated hardware in our stack, and it would be just dedicated to them. But that's something, just a kind of a high level example of kind of where we think it's going and what we've done to plan for that expansion in the future. But it'll kind of be a shift from traditional compute. So I think that's something that I've seen from the Hivelocity side. I guess, as Kirsten, anything you want to add to that on the Veeam side?
I just think in general, being able to, utilize next generation storage systems is really going to, help increase performance throughout your organization, right? So that's what I would add to that. And then also thinking about, when you modernizing your storage, so these new technologies that I've mentioned, AI, ML, you're going to be able to utilize those more within your environment, utilizing, AI to get more insights about your data that can help you make better decisions within your environment. For example, understanding your capacity needs. Maybe you need to make sure you're meeting compliance or data protection regulations, utilizing AI to help with that, and also, enhancing the security of your infrastructure. You're going to be able to gain better data availability and reliability. You don't have to worry about maybe like storage corruption or something like that. You're going to be able to make sure your critical data is always accessible. And then, we don't want to forget about these legacy systems as well. As you mentioned earlier, Jeff, you can repurpose this. You can use it for a lab environment. You can use it for archival or long-term storage. So it's like just trying to get the best of both worlds. You don't want to always get rid of the old, but sometimes we need to, but we can reuse it. We're recyclers here. We like to recycle, right? So to really achieve data resilience, we have to think about all these things. We need to think about how we're modernizing our infrastructure, what tools we're going to use to combat cyber. So we need to have a modern strategy for the modern business.
Yeah, that's cool. What about expanding that more into the financial side? Have you seen companies utilize that to reduce costs or make predictable?
Yeah, I think that, even utilizing like cloud-based and software-defined infrastructure is really going to lower your upfront costs. You're not going to have to buy big, large capital to, increase, to be able to scale. Utilizing, the cloud and, SaaS solutions and things like that, you're going to be able to easily scale. You're going to be able to scale up or down based on the demands. You're only going to have to pay for the storage that you use, right? And then on top of that, you want to make sure, just because we're talking about costs, and you mentioned this earlier, making sure that you're keeping an eye out for those hidden costs. A lot of times these like cloud-based or software-defined storage or even SaaS providers, right? They're going to have, built-in tools that you can use to help manage costs. So, looking at those tools and utilizing them to help manage costs, so you're not, paying, for 50 workloads in the cloud and you're not even using them because you just forgot you actually created that machine, right? So making sure that you're utilizing the tools that are there. You're going to have, with utilizing these types of platforms, you're going to have reduced maintenance and operational costs. And you're going to be able to move away from maybe these large capital expenditures, right? And think more of these other things that you should probably be spending your time and your money on, like cybersecurity, right? So when you think about cybersecurity, how can some of these emerging technologies help support cybersecurity and, identify cyber threats more effectively, in your opinion?
Yeah, it's kind of that's a tough one too, because as these especially as these environments kind of advance or get more modernized, even like I kind of mentioned earlier, you got clients that are more cloud native and don't necessarily run on IaaS. How do you secure that? You don't have Windows or a Linux machine to load an agent on to look for threats. And so then you kind of get into like log ingestion and collecting the same data, but in different ways, and analyzing it the same way to find those threats. It's a cat and mouse game. It's never going to end. It's only going to get more complex. But I think just having all of the pre-planning, again, having all the tools in place, when, at least from our side, whenever we're deploying environments, make sure things are solutioned properly, and having the options that clients are looking for to help secure those environments is key. And then once something is detected, kind of like you mentioned with the ransomware scanning, that you quickly identify it, isolate it, and then kill it. And I think that's kind of back to that cat and mouse game that never ends. That's the challenge. I know we're kind of running up on time here, Colleen. So.
Yep, that's okay, because we are at story time. So let's go ahead. I'm going to move forward. Yeah, this is just like some of we just focused on these. We just wanted like a little countdown of, a reminder of what we just kind of went through. So we're going to skip this because we covered that. Story time. Okay, so we're going to get a Q&A and right after this, but we just want to give you a couple of real life examples. One of the stories will represent a legacy system challenge, and the other one talks about how human error can disrupt a business. So I'm going to start with you, Kirsten. Can you go through the UK healthcare provider real quick, and then we'll turn it over to Jeff for Cricket Wireless.
Yeah, sure. So one of our customers is a UK healthcare provider. They have multiple, healthcare systems throughout the UK. So they have multiple, like hospitals, right, offices and things like that. So they had legacy infrastructure, legacy systems, and they had a lot of data in multiple places that was stored. So it was a complex environment. They needed to make sure that they were keeping track of where their data was being stored. They also needed to make sure that they were backing up and their applications. So due to these legacy systems, they were missing backup windows. When they needed to recover, process was really slow. And then they also were worried about cyber attacks, right? Because we talked about all the reasons like why legacy systems are vulnerable to cyber attacks. And there was a lot of manual processes. So they actually were having, they were sending their backups to tape, and they're actually having the receptionist like, take out the tape and store it, right? We don't want to do that, right? We don't want to do that. We want to make sure that the people who should be handling our data are handling our data. So with Veeam solution, they were able to, automate recovery processes through the Veeam management console that was able to actually manage all their backup data within one view. So they were able to be able to see all their backup servers, where they were located, store their backups within their, where they wanted to store, within certain sovereignties and things like that. They were able to test their recovery. And then they were also able to utilize immutable and encryption to protect their patient data, because they need to make sure that they're protecting that patient data as well to meet regulations. So by implementing this solution, they were able to meet their backup windows, making sure that they could meet their recovery point objectives. They were able to recover faster, and then they were able to make sure they had a little bit more peace of mind when it came to cyber attacks, with the security and cyber features that Veeam has integrated within its data protection platform. Oh yeah, so the lesson, right? So what was the lesson in all this? This was by utilizing a modern solution, they were able to make sure that their data was protected. So yeah, that was my story. What about you, Jeff? Don't you have? I've been hearing about your story. I haven't actually even heard your story yet. I'm dying to know what it is.
Yeah, when Colleen asked, like, yeah, we need to make this relatable. If there's any personal stories, this is the one that immediately popped to mind. So, I guess in a previous career, it's probably 2016, 2017. We'll just say I worked for a 3-letter company who I will not mention just to protect the innocent. But I was on the product side there, and we had a cloud environment, very similar, VMware environment, very similar to what we've got, a Hivelocity. A little bit more secure on our side now, but I'll tell you why. But we had all these internal users that were using that platform, so different divisions within this 3-letter company that were utilizing those cloud resources, and then we're paying for it. So we were footing the bill, or our organization was footing the bill. So we had a list of everything that was running that was internal. We sent out notifications for about 3 months. And to make a long story short, once we got down, people started pulling things out of there. But I would say there was about 3 of us that had about 40 or so accounts that had to go out to get deleted. So, get a list, we're logging in, we delete the VMs, delete the VApps, delete the BDCs, and going down the list, and all of a sudden my phone rings. I'm in like day 2, phone rings. It's my boss. He's like, I think it was the CIO of cricketwireless.com just called me, and you deleted, what are you doing? I'm like, well, I'm deleting things. I'm doing cleanup. And he's like, yeah, you just took down cricketwireless.com. And ironically, they were using Veeam, and they backed it up. I'm making a long story short. But they were able to restore it because they had a copy. And then, of course, next time I logged in to continue my deletion effort, the developers had removed my delete button. So that up to tech debt and human error. So that was like, that's the perfect story for this conversation. It's real life example. So.
I think it shows the innocence behind human error, right? Like, we don't mean to do it. We're cruising in our day. We're clicking our buttons, and something happens. It just happens. We're human, right? So
yeah, and if the leader, my velocity is on here, I can't see who's on here, but if you are, I won't do it again. I promise.
Leadership left a while ago. No, I'm kidding. Yeah. No, this is perfect. So thank you for that. And I'm sorry that we're a little bit over. We just had so much that we really wanted to share with everybody. I'm going to turn this back over to Victoria.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Colleen. Yeah, we have time for, looks like we have time for one question here. So let's go ahead and get to it. This one reads, what are your thoughts on deploying and protecting clients that are more hybrid in nature?
You want me to start with that one, Kirsten, or?
Yeah, you can go ahead.
Yeah, I would say just kind of what we touched on before. Proper planning. Make sure you've got all the requirements that both from a technical and a financial perspective that you're trying to meet. And it doesn't really, you want to apply tools that will kind of span those different clouds. So if you've got stuff in your own colo, or you've got stuff in a private cloud, or you've got things in public cloud, you want to have consistency amongst all those different products to make sure that you're protecting everything that's in there, and you've got it's scalable. There's standards that are set, so it's easier to operate. So I think that's what comes to mind for that one. Anything else, Kirsten, on that one from your side?
Yeah, I think just proper planning is really key here. Just because, data resides there could be data in a lot of different places, on premises, in the cloud, in a private cloud. So just making sure that you are keeping track of that. Maybe you're monitoring where you have your workloads running, right? And when I actually first read the question, I thought hybrid work environment, like remote employees, right? Which could be a whole different thing. So just making sure you're planning properly, and you have organization policies that you're dispersing out to everyone in the organization, I think is key.
Yeah. And just in summary, I just want to say, I appreciate everyone's time today, but, I just want to touch on that, hopefully this was interesting. And, us on the Hivelocity side in a partnership with Veeam, we've taken all of these concerns into account in our private cloud and in our other products as well. And not to get too salesy, because this isn't like a sales pitch, although it kind of could be, but what we want to do is essentially be an extension of your IT staff. We want to be that trusted advisor that's going to help you navigate through these concerns, design solutions if you're looking for more managed, or if you want to do it on your own. We want to go on that journey with you and kind of act as that. We want to be a partner because as your business succeeds, ours grows too. So it's a win-win situation. So I just wanted to wrap up with that.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Jeff. Well, it does look like that is all the time that we have for today. To the attendees, just a quick note, if we didn't get to your question or if you still have one, please make sure to type those into the Q&A box and we will get them over to the team. So with that, I want to give a big thank you to Jeff, Kirsten, and Colleen, of course, for being on with us today. Thank you to the audience for attending today's webcast, and of course, a special thank you to Hivelocity and Veeam for sponsoring today's event presented by Virtualization and Cloud Review. We had a wonderful time with you all. Thank you so much for being on with us, and have a wonderful rest of your day.